Chapter 9, The Romanovs' Decision. After hearing the news, Alexander pressed Sergei for more information. Who was it? It was a terrorist organization known as Black Hand. They're known to conduct attempts and successful not only in Ruthenia but across Europa as well. Sergei answered and continued explaining. Preliminary analysis from the Department for Protecting Public Security and Order tells us that the residue found on the convoy debris is consistent with bombs used by the Black Hands in the past. Alexander's face was covered in horrified expression. The Black Hand was an international terrorist group that is wreaking havoc across Europa. They targeted countries that are run by monarchs such as the Empire of Deutschland, the Habsburg Empire, the Britannia Empire, and the Sardinia Kingdom, to name a few. However, their main motives were not clear and left many investigators puzzled. Are they trying to destabilize and topple the power of the monarchy in Europa? Are they just a group of insane anarchists? No one knew for certain. Whatever it is, Alexander considered those fanatic groups as the main threat to his empire. So, what's your plan? Do you have any information regarding their locations? That's the scary part, sire, we don't. The Black Hands has headquarters spread across Europa and on the Black Continent. They are hard to track. But we got a tip from our intelligence bureau saying that there will be another attempt to assassinate you. Sergei informed. An attempt on my life? Alexander's eyes grow wide upon hearing his report. Your Majesty, it is yet to be confirmed and they are working day and night to validate the threat. But in the meantime, your safety must be assured and is our utmost priority. I'm going to have to suggest you and your sisters evacuate the Winter Palace before the 1st of August. The 1st of August? Isn't that the time when a mass protest will be held by steel workers? Coincidentally, it was also the time the Intelligence Bureau told us when the Black Hand groups are going to attack. This means they are using the crowds to mask their intent, and once they get closer to you, I fear that you will be exposed to a higher risk of being attacked. Alexander closed his eyes and took a deep breath to calm down. He paced around and then stopped. His uneasy and troubled expression was noticed by Sergei. Your Majesty. It was getting harder for Sergei to speak as he saw the Emperor's face grow darker and darker with each passing moment. At last, Alexander looked at him with a calm expression. Let's not worry about them now, Sergei. I know that you're doing everything you can to assure my safety. For now, I suggest we keep this information secret. He walked up to Sergei. I will give my decision tonight, I just need time to think through this clearly. Yes, Your Majesty, Sergei answered dutifully. Alexander swept his glance to Anna, whose wheelchairs are being pushed around by the servant on the palace's grounds. A possible assassination in the mass protest, huh? Alexander thought to himself, assessing the pros and cons of his future decisions. If he were to evacuate before the date of the protest, the safety of his family will be guaranteed, but if he does that, he will gain the ire of the people who yearned and longed for change and possibly revolt. It's a tough decision to make, his new family or the people. I'm gonna have to consult Christina and Tiffany about this, he said to himself. Thanks, Sergei, for the information. Will that be all? I believe that's all, sire. I'm gonna return now to my office. Sergei bowed and left the palace's grounds. Alexander watched him go for a while and then went back to Anna to continue their moments. It was past 6. Alexander called in Christina and Tiffany and asked them to join him in his office. The two silver-haired princesses sat in the chair. Across the table was Alexander, who wore a serious expression. I've got important matters to discuss with both of you. Please listen carefully. Sergei just informed me that the Black Hand is responsible for killing our father and mother and is now targeting me. Alexander reported. Are you serious? Tiffany asked, her face turning pale and lower lips trembling. Yes, the Department for Protecting Public Security believed that the Black Hand agents will disguise themselves as civilians in the protest that will be held at the main plaza of Winter Palace in August 1st. He paused and took a glimpse at Anastasia and continued. Now, Prime Minister, Sir Sergei wants us to evacuate the palace before the protest to assure our safety. Alexander's concluded, his head lowered as he delivered the news. Christina and Tiffany stared at each other, stunned. Do you think it's a good idea to evacuate the palace? Christina asked, trying to be objective but finding it hard because she really can't bear the thought of her brother being in danger. Won't it get worse if we leave the palace without listening to the people? I think we should stay here. No, Tiffany, calm down, please let me finish, Christina said, raising her hand to signal the young princess to be quiet. Then she turned to her brother. I know that you care for us, your sisters, but the people need to see the emperor. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I learned this from history books. Tiffany shook her head rapidly. Isn't that what happened to the Francois Empire? Where they stormed the palace and, she stammered, unable to complete her words. Alexander tried to calm her down by placing a hand on her shoulder. I don't think we should panic. The army has been alerted. Alexander assured Tiffany, in times such as these, the Romanov have to be strong. Her words were cut off by Tiffany. But isn't the first duty of the emperor is to his family? Brother, think of Anastasia. Do you want her to see suffer from the hands of those peasants? Tiffany. Christina raised her voice, asserting her authority as the eldest sister. I heard there are thousands of coming, brother. Thousands of angry peasants and workers. Why do you think the army has been alerted, sister? Tiffany rebutted as Christina found herself not able to respond. Where did you learn that? Alexander asked Tiffany. Everyone in the Ruthenia Empire knows it, brother. Brother. Christina placed her hand on Alexander's desk, her eyes fixed on him. I know that we are at risk, but if we were to leave unnoticed and the people find out that there was no one in the palace, it'll get much worse. Alexander took a deep breath before making a decision. Christina was right objectively. He doesn't have to be a history nerd to know the after effect of leaving the palace. The people would surely revolt. But, the threat remains, he could die on that day. He had already experienced dying once, he doesn't want it to happen again. Fearfully because there might not be a third chance. If he also leaves the palace, the social contract between the emperor and his people will break. They might not believe the emperor as the being sent by God to rule over them. There will be more social unrest, strikes, and protests that would make his life here unbearable and possibly die at their hands. The world might be different from his past world, but in this era, progressive ideas such as the right of an individual people shall be respected. Objectively speaking, the rule of the emperor of the Ruthenia Empire is outdated. Looking at its neighbors, their government is different, where the people have more rights. Constitutional monarchies and republics. The Ruthenia Empire is the sole country in Europe that is an autocracy. The people of Ruthenia wanted those changes to implement here. This means he has to listen to and entertain them. If he were to do that, the people who lord the emperor, which is mutually beneficial to both the parties. Still, he has to make a decision where neither Christina nor Tiffany won't get hurt. Alexander looked at both of them with a serious expression. I've made my decision. The two princesses looked at him with a tense look. I will not leave the palace. He let it out. The two girls were surprised by the answer, especially Tiffany, who are now looking at him with questioning eyes. Are you serious, brother? Why won't you listen to me? She demanded, her face showing her disbelief and frustration. The Black Hand could kill you. They could kill Anna too. Please, brother, at least I beg you. Please, please evacuate the palace. Alexander let out a deep sigh. He understood his sister's grief and worries. But, he has already made a decision and he's willing to accept the consequences. I'm sorry, Tiffany, you're right about the Black Hand. They will do something bad to us, to me. So I already made another decision to evacuate you and Anna until the situation is settled. As the emperor of the Ruthenia Empire, I can't live with fear. I must face the challenges thrown at me head on, and listen to the people's pleas. Tiffany stared at her brother. The look on her face changed from anger to sadness. In short, he looked like she was going to cry. I can't believe you, brother. Alexander stood up from his seat and walked over to Tiffany, who is on verge of crying. He pulled her close to his body and gently hugged her. I hate you, brother. I don't want to lose you too. I can't accept it. Despite their relationship with each other, where Tiffany would often be blunt and cold towards Alexander, in truth, She really cares for him. Ah, this family is so emotional and I'm always getting caught with it. Ah, this stupid body affecting my emotions. Don't worry, Tiffany, I will be fine. Be calm and tell Anna about it. I promise that everything will return to how things should be, he whispered to her face. Alexander's exhausted eyes flickered to Christina. You should go with them as well. Christina shook her head. No, I'm staying with you, brother. I will stay by your side when you face the people. As the Grand Duchess of Ruthenia Empire, I also have a responsibility to listen to my people. Alexander smiled upon hearing that. Fine, I won't challenge your decision. Then his attention returned to Tiffany. Tiffany, we're all scared too, but sometimes you have to stand up and face your fear. You can't let your fear control you. The world is unfair and the people that will march down in the streets demand us to simply change their life for the better. As the Emperor, it is my job to bring it to them. Tiffany was speechless. I will have the car ready by tomorrow. You will head to another palace. Brother, a day has passed. The royal car was on standby in front of the main entrance of the Winter Palace, waiting for the Grand Duchess Tiffany. Dressed in a nice, long, white dress and high black heels, Tiffany was ready to leave. However, while walking toward the car, she stopped midway and glanced at the main entrance of the palace. There, Alexander and Christina can be seen standing shoulder to shoulder, seeing her off. Her lower lips started to tremble, wanting to say something, but her throat was blocked by her emotions. The next thing she knew, she was already running towards the two. Alexander and Christina were stunned when they saw her running towards them. Seconds later, she jumped at the two and tangled them in a tight embrace. I'll stay, brother. It was at this moment Tiffany changed her decision suddenly. Chapter 10, the first day of August. The 1st of August has finally arrived. Alexander looked over his window and saw a silhouette over the horizon. No, they are not shadows, there were people, marching in the streets. They were holding signs and banners, with words he couldn't make out due to distance. But he was sure that it was about the pleas they are going to make once they arrive at the Winter Palace. Christina and Tiffany watched as their brother peered through the window. The three of them have been waiting since the early hours of the morning. They have been waiting and waiting until the people finally came. Okay, this is it, everyone, there's no turning back. The two of them stood up. Christina and Tiffany straightened their dresses while Alexander smoothed his red military uniform. Your Majesty, this is a bad idea. Sergei. Alexander turned his head to his right, where Sergei has been standing by the wall. But you've assured me that you will guarantee my safety when I face my people, am I right? Alexander asked. Yes, sir. I've also increased the number of troops around the palace for maximum protection, however. Then let's go. Alexander cut him off and headed towards the door of his office. Sergei. Alexander sighed and followed him. The pace of his steps was faster than Alexander's. Upon reaching the door, Alexander turned his head towards his siblings. Tiffany, you can stay here if you want. Tiffany shook her head. No, brother, I must face them also. I've realized my role as the Grand Duchess of Ruthenia Empire. I can't just bubble myself up inside the palace. I will go with you too. Christina smiled sweetly upon hearing determination. Alexander was pleased with her resolve. 5 days ago she was about to leave the palace out of fear, but she suddenly changed her mind in the end. The reason was unknown, but Alexander was delighted that she didn't run away and faced her duties as the Grand Duchess of Ruthenia Empire. Well, even though they've prepared themselves for this for the past few days, the fear of getting killed by the hands of a syndicate known as Black Hand still lingered in their minds. Alexander gulped his saliva before signaling the two Imperial guards standing by on each side of the door to open it. The two guards nodded as they acknowledged the command and swung the door open. Once they opened the door, the bright sunlight shone inside the room. The first thing they saw was hundreds. No, thousands of people marching towards the Winter Palace, stretching all over the streets of the city. Upon seeing this, the prince and princess let out a gasp. Although the door was already opened, the people can't see the emperor and the princess yet. Since they've prepared for this, a platform was created in front of the Winter Palace that will serve as their stage. Alexander, Christina, and Tiffany walked down the steps and towards that platform. The people still can't see them. As they neared the stage, Alexander could hear the overwhelming shouts and screams of the people. "It's His Majesty. It's the Emperor. Long live the Emperor." The people continued to chant as they raised their fists high with overwhelming joy. However, the next second, it intensified. "Look. The princesses are also on the stage. I'm so happy to see the royal family all together. Long live the royal family." Since there are a lot of people who attended the march, Sergei ordered hundreds of troops to line up in the front of the stage. They stood in a straight line with their rifles slung on their shoulders. Upon seeing the people, Christina and Tiffany gave a light bow as a sign of respect. The people roared in joy after seeing their princesses bowing down to them. Wave after wave of roars and chants broke out from the masses. It was an overwhelming display of joy and tears. Christina and Tiffany were touched by this scene, seeing all the people expressing how thankful and happy they were to see that they were granted the presence of the royal family. However, Christina and Tiffany also noticed the state they were in. They were all wearing ragged clothes, which meant that many of them were no longer getting adequate food and shelter. Their eyes were bloodshot red, a sign of malnutrition. A lot of the children were barefooted, not wearing any kind of protection on their feet. Despite knowing the risk of heat stroke due to today's hot weather, they still took to the street while the rest seemed unaffected by the heat. They continued to march down the streets with their heads held up high. The feeling of intense guilt and sadness overwhelmed the princesses. They've been suffering too much while they are cooped up inside the palace, living a lavish and comfortable life without breaking their backs just to get by. "Brother, we should talk to their representative as soon as possible. Many people are fainting from heat stroke," Christina urged. Alexander nodded his head. Meanwhile, Sergei has been watching from behind, witnessing the scene unfold. He held high regard for the emperor. He's smart, he thought. That's what a politician would do to appease the masses, by showing themselves up in front of them sincerely. Knowing that they were heard, smiled upon, and received warmly. But it still presents a danger. After all, the Black Hand's operatives are concealed among thousands of crowds. He ordered the soldiers responsible for crowd control to remain constantly alert. Alexander stepped forward, glancing at the sea of people before him. One man tried to approach him but was stopped by the two soldiers responsible for protecting the royal family. Alexander saw this and waved his hand, ordering them to stand down. The guards immediately obeyed his command and let go of the man. Alexander studied the man. He appears to be wearing a black cassock with a cross hanging from his neck. "A priest," he thought. "Your Majesty." He fell down on one knee with his head lowered 90 degrees. "Your Highness, I'm here to represent all the people behind me. They have been subjected to hunger, unbearable heat, and suffering from the harsh working conditions and exploited by those who are in power. We plead for your help." So he is the leader of this massive mass, huh? Just in the right timing. He's been waiting for him to step up. "Stand up," he ordered. The priest stood up, but his head still lowered, avoiding eye contact with the king. "What is your name?" Alexander asked. The man answered, his head still lowered. "George Gabon, Your Majesty." "George Gabon, mind if you enter the palace to discuss this matter?" "Why, Your Majesty?" Gabon asked. "You may not know this, but there are nefarious groups among the crowds that are threatening my safety, so it is best that we continue this inside where my safety is guaranteed." Hearing that, Gabon didn't hesitate to accept the request of the emperor. "Of course, Your Majesty." Alexander nodded his head, then gave a signal to Sergei to order the guards to escort him inside. Sergei immediately gave the order to the guards to let George Gabon inside. Inside the palace, George Gabon was in awe seeing the interior of the palace. The gilded walls, the red and gold carpets, the lavishly furnished furniture, the paintings with elaborate gold frames, the chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and so on. All of it made him realize that he's been living in poverty while the royal family is living in such luxury. He was led into one of the sitting rooms. There he finally meets the two Grand Duchesses. He fell on his knee once again and bowed his head down in front of them. "It is an honor to meet your Imperial Highnesses." The two princesses smiled as they beckoned him to stand up. They can see the sincerity and honesty he presented. "Please sit, Sir George," urged Alexander. "Your people are still waiting outside under the sweltering heat. It's best we finish this as soon as possible. Don't worry about the people who fainted, the royal family will pay their hospital fees and medicine." "I'm grateful, Your Majesty," George said solemnly before taking his seat. "So, Sir George, you are free to speak what's in your mind. I won't censure you for anything you say. I will listen with my mind and heart open." "Okay then, I apologize beforehand for any offense I might cause." With a cough, Priest George Gabon shared his thoughts. Chapter 11, What the Ruthenian People Needs. His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor. He started. "We, workers and inhabitants of the city of St. Petersburg, members of various estates of the realm, our wives, children, and helpless old parents, have come to you, Sovereign, to seek justice and protection. We are impoverished and oppressed, we are burdened with work, and insulted. We are treated not like humans but like slaves who must suffer a bitter fate and keep silent. And we have suffered, but we only get pushed deeper and deeper into a gulf of misery, ignorance, and lack of rights. Despotism and arbitrariness are suffocating us, we are gasping for breath. Sovereign, we have no strength left. We have reached the limit of our patience. We have come to that terrible moment when it is better to die than to continue unbearable suffering. And so we left our work and declared to our employers that we will not return to work until they meet our demands. We do not ask much, we only want that without which life is hard labor and eternal suffering. Our first request was that our employers discuss our needs together with us. But they refused to do this, they denied us the right to speak about our needs, on the grounds that the law does not provide us with such a right. Also unlawful were our other requests, to reduce the working day to 8 hours, for them to set wages together with us and by agreement with us, to examine our disputes with lower-level factory administrators, to increase the wages of unskilled workers and women to 1 ruble per day, to abolish overtime work, to provide medical care attentively and without insult, to build shops so that it is possible to work there and not face death from the awful drafts, rain, and snow. Our employers and the factory administrators considered all this to be illegal, every one of our requests was a crime, and our desire to improve our condition was slanderous insolence. Sovereign, there are thousands of us here, outwardly we are human beings, but in reality, neither we nor the Ruthenian people as a whole are provided with any human rights, even the right to speak, to think, to assemble, to discuss our needs, or to take measure to improve our conditions. They have enslaved us and they did so under the protection of your officials, with their aid and with their cooperation. They imprison and send into exile any one of us who dares to speak on behalf of the interests of the working class and of the people. They punish us for a good heart and responsive spirit as if for a crime. To pity a downtrodden and tormented person with no rights is to commit a grave crime. The entire working people and the peasants are subjected to the arbitrariness of a bureaucratic administration composed of embezzlers of public funds and thieves who not only have not been concerned at all for the interests of the Ruthenian people but who harm those interests. The bureaucratic administration has reduced the country to complete destitution, drawn it into a shameful war, and brought Ruthenia ever further towards ruin. We, the workers and the people, have no voice in the expenditure of the enormous sums that are collected from us. We do not even know where the money collected from the impoverished people goes. The people are deprived of any possibility of expressing their wishes and demands, or of participating in the establishment of taxes and in their expenditure. Workers are deprived of the possibility of organizing into unions to defend their interests. Sovereign. Does all this accord with the law of God, by whose grace you reign? And is it possible to live under such laws? Would it not be better if we, the toiling people of all Ruthenia, died? Let the capitalists, exploiters of the working class, and the bureaucrats, embezzlers of public funds and the pillagers of the Ruthenian people, live and enjoy themselves. Sovereign, this is what we face and this is the reason that we have gathered before the walls of your palace. Here we seek our last salvation. Do not refuse to come to the aid of your people, lead it out of the grave of poverty, ignorance, and lack of rights. grant it the opportunity to determine its own destiny, and deliver it from them the unbearable yoke of the bureaucrats. Tear down the wall that separates you from your people and let it rule the country together with you. You have been placed on the throne for the happiness of the people. The bureaucrats, however, snatch this happiness out of our hands, and it never reaches us. We get only grief and humiliation. Sovereign, examine our requests attentively and without any anger. They incline not to evil, but to the good, both for us and for you. Ours is not the voice of insolence but of the realization that we must get out of a situation that is unbearable for everyone. Ruthenia is too big, her needs are too diverse and many, for her to be ruled only by bureaucrats. We need popular representation. It is necessary for the people to help themselves and administer themselves. After all, only the people know its real needs. Let the capitalist be there, and the worker, and the bureaucrat, and the priest, and the doctor and the teacher. Let everyone, whoever they are, elect their representatives. Let everyone be free and equal in his voting rights, and to that end order that elections to the Constituent Assembly be conducted under universal, secret, and equal suffrage. He paused after letting all out the ills of the country. He waited for the reaction of the Grand Duchesses and the Emperor but did not receive any from them. Till now he was the only one speaking and hoped that they had a different view of what he was saying. After a second moment, George continued, "Here is the list of what the people needs, Sovereign." George pulled a paper out of his pocket and read it aloud. "But since it's a lot, let me enumerate it for you. Measures against the ignorance of the Ruthenian people and against its lack of rights. 1. Immediate freedom and return home for all those who have suffered for their political and religious convictions, for strike activity, and for peasant disorders. 2. Immediate proclamation of the freedom and inviolability of the person, of freedom of speech and of the press, of freedom of assembly, and of freedom of conscience in matters of religion. 3. Universal and compulsory public education at state expense. 4. Accountability of government ministers to the people and a guarantee of lawful administration. 5. Equality of all before the law without exception. 6. Separation of church and state. 2. Measures against the poverty of the people. 1. Abolition of indirect taxes and their replacement by a direct, progressive income tax. 2. Abolition of redemption payments, cheap credit, and the gradual transfer of land to the people. 3. Naval ministry contracts should be filled in Ruthenia, not abroad. 4. Termination of the war according to the will of the people. 2. Measures against the oppression of labor by capital. 1. Abolition of the office of factory inspector. 2. Establishment in factories and plants of permanent commissions elected by the workers, which jointly with the administration are to investigate all complaints coming from individual workers. A worker cannot be fired except by a resolution of this commission. 3. Freedom for producer-consumer cooperatives and workers' trade unions, at once. 4. An 8-hour working day and regulation of overtime work. 5. Freedom for labor to struggle with capital, at once. 6. Wage regulation, at once. 7. Guaranteed participation of representatives of the working classes in drafting a law on state insurance for workers, at once. These, Sovereign, are our main needs, about which we have come to you. Give the order, swear to meet these needs, and you will make Ruthenia both happy and glorious, and your name will be fixed in our hearts and the hearts of our posterity for all time. But if you do not give the order, if you do not respond to our prayer, then we shall die here, on this square, in front of your palace. We have nowhere else to go and no reason to. There are only 2 roads for us, one to freedom and happiness, the other to the grave. Let our lives be sacrificed for suffering Ruthenia. We do not regret that sacrifice, we embrace it eagerly. George breathed deeply after letting everything out in his mind and heart, yet was apprehensive despite the Emperor giving him permission to speak freely. Alexander and the 2 Grand Duchesses have a grim look written over their faces as reality had just struck them. "So this is what's happening every day?" Christina asked, her eyes moist as if she were going to cry. "Yes, Your Royal Highness," George replied somberly. "That is why we've come to you, to save us from our suffering. It isn't that much to ask for our happiness, right?" His words struck the princesses in the heart like a knife stabbing in every direction. It was painful to hear. The royal family has been living in comfort and in luxury. Yet they didn't know that the things they have in the palace, such as the exquisite and expensive furniture, palaces, and meal, are all because of the hard-working people of Ruthenian people who were breaking their backs in the field just to get by. The harsh reality outside the palace has been shown through George's genuine speech and sincere eyes. This is something that they can't turn their back on. Christina and Tiffany both looked at Alexander, who was the sovereign of the Ruthenia Empire, the man who holds most of the power. He is the only person that can change the fate of his people, who is yearning for a good life that they deserve. Alexander thought of his past, where he is living in the modern age, where people have the rights and freedom to absolutely everything. In this world, they don't have access to such privileges. Only the aristocracy and nobility have something called human rights. The people below them can only be called livestock. Alexander was disgusted by the thought. Why would you look down upon someone just because of the blood running in their veins? What gives them the right to treat them like an animal? They too deserve to be happy, to be sad, to be loved, and loved. The reason why his company flourished is that he cared for the people, giving them raises, benefits, medical insurance, and others. In return, they'll do a good job, producing him a more competitive product that launched him to the top. If he can do that to his company, he can do it in this country. However, this is a huge decision. If he accepts this, he'll surely receive the ire of the nobility, the crooks they called capitalists exploiting them. But the working class is 90% of the Ruthenia's population. If he rejected their plea, they'll surely strike again, and it won't be peaceful as this. It could turn into an armed revolution, which is the last thing he wants. So, Alexander made a decision. Alexander breathed deeply. "Sir George Gabon, I, Alexander Romanov, the Emperor of all Ruthenia, wholeheartedly accept your petition. I swear that I'll do all my power to fulfill the needs of the Ruthenian people." A relieved smile emerged on George's face. He was pleased. Tears escaped from his eyes and streamed down his cheeks. He has been hoping for this. The Emperor has smiled upon the people. However, Creator's thoughts. Sorry, I'm just diamond. Sorry, I'm just diamond. Creation is hard. Cheer me up with your power stones. Chapter 12. Acceptance. As an autocrat of this nation who holds the most power in the government, it'll take time for me to create a legislative body, as I have to consult a plethora of ministers, Alexander explained and continued. But I can assure you that you will get the representation the people desperately need. Gabon touched his chest as heaved a sigh of relief. I understand, Your Majesty, your assurance alone is enough. A small smile emerged on Alexander's face. It is my desire to ensure happiness and dignity of my people. I'm the image of my people, and with the help of God, I will do all my power to bring the country to prosperity and glory. Yes, Your Majesty. So let's get on with something I can do right now as an autocrat. I will issue a proclamation tomorrow about the people's needs, the wage regulation, the working days, improvement of working conditions, and immediate release of those who were wrongfully jailed, among other matters. As for the war with the Yamato Empire, I've reached the embassy of Ruthenia in Edo for a peace treaty. Though there are still preparations that need to be met, I assure you that the war with the East will end at the soonest time possible, he declared. I thank you for your immense generosity, Your Majesty, Gabon said with a grateful smile on his face. Now, you can now let the people outside know that your goals have been achieved. Yes, Your Majesty. Outside the Winter Palace, George Gabon stood on the platform where he addressed the sea of people waiting keenly for the news. People of Ruthenia, I deliver a message from the Emperor himself, Alexander Romanov, that our efforts have not been in vain, he declared, raising his fist high. The people cheered after hearing Gabon's declaration. Some wept with joy while others are in tears of hope and gratitude. Long live the Emperor! Long live Ruthenia! Long live the Emperor! Long live Ruthenia! Long live the Emperor! Long live Ruthenia! People of Ruthenia, our Emperor listened to our pleas, and he shall bring us the change that we have yearned for so long, Gabon roared as he added. Loud thunderous applause thundered the sky after George's declaration. People wept because of joy, Women hugged their children tightly, and some even kissed their partners. The soldiers tasked to protect the Winter Palace smiled seeing the people celebrating their victory. The civilians who were crying their hearts out just a few minutes ago were now smiling, laughing, and enjoying the moment. They were happy that their efforts has been rewarded. Somewhere within the sea of people, a certain individual watched this victorious scene unfold while remaining hidden among the crowds. They wore black robes covering his whole body, hiding their appearance, age, and gender. "This is bad," the robed figure muttered after seeing the state of his surroundings. Judging from the voice, the person was male. His expression was hidden under the darkness of his hood, but the tone of his voice showed no panic, despite his words. "What should we do, sir?" another robed figure asked. "This is something that I didn't expect from the young emperor. I never knew he'll accept such progressive reforms." The man who seemed to be the boss replied calmly, "This is a miscalculation on my part. I guess we shall reevaluate who we are facing here." "Yeah, I thought so too," the subordinate nodded his agreement. "The emperor might be young, but I can tell that he isn't stupid. He showed himself in front of the crowds in just a minute, invited the priest, and continued their discussion there. They are cautious. And after they concluded the meeting, the people's support suddenly. They might be aware of our existence here. Shall we fall back?" "Yes, we'll have to think of another way. This is going to be hard on our part. Now that the population is favoring the emperor once again with his promise, we will have to devise another way to tip the balance." "Understood." Upon agreeing to fall back, the two discreetly left the streets, wading through the crowd, and disappeared. Inside the Winter Palace, Alexander was watching through the window. Observing the people as they slowly dispersed after George Gabon's full speech. "Your Majesty," Sergei called from behind. "You agreed to the petition?" There is a hint of dissatisfaction in his voice. "I have no choice, Sergei. What do you want me to do to reject them? It'll only add fuel to the fire. We have to give the people something." "But what will happen if they demand more? Will you accept their demands?" "Sir, you're giving the people a taste of democracy, and once they tasted it they'll ask for more and more and more until there is nothing left for you to control." Alexander scoffed at his remarks. "But isn't Britannia Empire a constitutional monarch?" Sergei covertly rolled his eyes in dissatisfaction. "Sergei, you wanted to protect the Ruthenia Empire, am I right?" "Yes, Your Majesty," he vowed resolutely. That's odd. You want to protect the empire yet you don't want it to change. It's kind of baffling, don't you think?" Finally, Alexander looked at him, their eyes locked. "Do you know the reason why the Ruthenia Empire is falling behind Europa?" Alexander asked. Sergei didn't answer as he remained silent. "It's because you are afraid of change. As times change, so do the people. We can't live in the past forever. We must accept the reality in order to go forward. I'm not like my father who chose to return the rule of autocracy, nor my grandfather that repressed the minorities who have their own culture and language. Yet, sir, giving the people freedom invites unwanted demand for independence. As the emperor of the Ruthenia Empire, you have a duty to keep the empire together and expand its glory by conquering lands." Alexander sighed as he sat on the edge of his table. He removed his military hat and spun it around his fingers. "I might not be studious, but I sure didn't forget the role of the emperor. We are just doing reforms, a complete overhaul of the system. If we wanted to catch up with our neighbors and never repeat the humiliating defeat from the Yamato Empire. For that, I need your help, Sir Sergei." "Sir?" Sergei's eyes widened in surprise. "You've been serving the empire for more like 20 years. You have a lot of experience in bureaucracy, and for that, I'm considering you an asset." "I'm only protecting the dynasty of the royal family, Your Majesty," Sergei said as he saw Alexander walking toward him. "With the support of the public, we will be able to do a lot. People are the source of strength. Without them, there will be no Ruthenia Empire," Alexander said as he stopped in front of him. "It's time to change, Sergei. Are you going to be with me in this endeavor?" Alexander asked earnestly as he offered a handshake. Sergei remained silent for a moment. He looked at Alexander as he nodded his head. "For the glory of Ruthenia Empire, of course." and shook his hand. Alexander clapped his hands together as he returned to his seat. The young emperor has successfully gathered the support of change. So when are you going to leave for the Yamato Empire? The first session will be conducted in a week, so I will leave 3 days. Then do you have time tomorrow? I have something to discuss with you about the new legislative body I plan to implement. Yes, Your Majesty, Sergei answered as he bowed before him. Do you already have an idea in mind? I have a rough draft in my mind, so we'll probably discuss this tomorrow. Understood. I will take my leave now, Your Majesty. Yeah, sure. Alexander waved his hand casually. 30 minutes later, Alexander spent his time alone in the office drafting a new constitution with reference to his homeland in his world, the United States. Good thing that he read it once and has a photographic memory that allows him basically to remember everything that he read or see. Still, it's not enough. He doesn't have much knowledge when it comes to politics, and his closest advisors would surely find a loophole in his would-be constitution. Looks like I'm going to be busy today, he sighed inwardly. Ever since he assumed the role of the emperor, it's always worked after work after work. Why does he have to inherit such a failing state? He could have been reincarnated in another country with little to no internal conflict, or probably reborn in a simple family. Speaking of family, something instantly comes to his mind. The bacteria colonies that he is growing in the lab he left 5 days ago must have been completely grown. I'm going to check on them later, he mumbled to himself, and hoped that he can find a strain of Actinomycetes streptomyces griseus in one of the Petri dishes.